All right, YouTube, I'm back with the update on the truck. The last video I showed you guys that I was going to mess with my heater control. So I explained to you that I was gonna extend my switches off of my panel. So I got that accomplished. Here are my switches, my temperature, and this one is my blend door, you know, to make it go to the feet or the defrost, all of that stuff. So I got those extended. If you can see here, I probably added I'd say a foot, maybe a little over 1.5 feet to the wires. So as I explained to you before, the plan was to be able to mount these separately inside of my dash bezel so I could move them closer together and be able to fit. So then I started working on my dash cluster, my dash bezel, I'm sorry, for the radio and the controls in the center. So now this was the factory. This came from the factory. Down here in this bottom area here was where the heater controls was from the factory. This area here was where the radio, the factory radio, everything was digital. Up here was your hazard lights, I think traction control and something else was in this area. Then there was a clock here. And then here was the volume and the adjuster for the radio station. So I got the clock over here. Here's the clock. The clock just sat down in, you know, inside of this hole. I looked at the clock. The clock just, it sets. You can set this clock by these two buttons right here. Push these two buttons and it makes the clock move and you can set it. But on the back it tells you, if I can get it to focus, it has the battery and the ground for the actual clock. Then it has the illumination of the clock, the positive and the negative for that. So the illumination of the clock is 5 volts. So the two middle wires would be a positive and a negative 5 volts. The two outside wires are 12 volts, a battery positive and a battery ground, and they have to be continuous 12 volts. So this will stay running all the time to keep the time. So anyway, I'm showing you guys this because what I've decided to do was my next door neighbor gave me a piece of ABS plastic. So I went ahead and made me a new centerpiece for my dash bezel. Now, if you look, this piece here actually fit inside of here from the back side and screwed in. And this is where all of the controls went. So I've been messing with this all day, off and on. So this is what I came up with. This is 1/4-inch ABS plastic. They sell it at Menards. Comes in a 4x8 sheet. I don't know the exact price of it. Like I said, my neighbor had a piece he had been cutting pieces off of already. He let me cut a piece off of it. So what I did was I got my shape with I put tape on here, just masking tape, and masked this whole area up and got my outside line, covered the whole thing in masking tape, ran my permanent marker along the line of this. Then once I pulled the tape off, I took some scissors and cut the permanent marker line out. Then I took that tape because it was sticky on the backside, and I put it right on my ABS plastic, and I traced my line and I cut that out. And I allowed myself a little bit on each side, maybe a 1/4 inch on each side to make sure I had enough because I knew that I had to heat it and bend it in here. So now if you look on here, you can see that the factory one had all of these holes in it and it's screwed down. And so what I did was I had all of the screws. I saved all of the screws I took out of it, my little magnet tray. And I went and found me some real little washers. And I drilled holes. And I mean, they're not perfect. You can see some of the holes are bigger than they should have been and everything. But like I said, I had to heat this and bend this shape in here. So I was heating it with the torch and the heat gun at the same time. So as I was going, some of these holes I had to make bigger because the spot where I thought they was a little off. Once I bent it so much or heated it up so much, it was a little off. So, you know, it's not perfect. But for me, for what I got going on, I'm really pleased with it. As you can see, it covers the whole dash, center section of the dash really well. There's a little gap at the top up here because there's no bolt holes to hold it, but I can push that up and probably put some epoxy on it. I still got to trim. You can see it needs to be trimmed. So once I get everything figured out, I'm gonna go ahead and trim all of that, trim all of this excess off. You know, all of the excess behind here, trim all of that off, because this actually snaps in right here into the dash itself. And now, excuse me, the reason why I did this was the whole reason why I did it was because I want to put a double din radio in here. So with the factory one, I didn't have anywhere to put a double din radio in here, and none of the aftermarket places. Like I looked on Crutchfield, I looked at, you know, a bunch of different sites that sells radio installation kits, and nobody actually makes a kit for this Cadillac SRX 2012. They had some kits that were similar, but they said that with some modifications, you could have made it work and everything. But I figured if I was gonna go, they were still like $40, maybe 50, some of them. So I figured if I was gonna do all of that, you know, my neighbor gave me this for free. Why not try it first and see if I could come up with it? So I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Let me grab the radio and show you guys so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. So here's my double din I got. It's just a Pioneer Bluetooth. It's not one of the top of the line ones, but it's like the middle, you know. It ain't the best one, it ain't the worst one. It's right in between. I've had it for a while. It's probably an older model, I don't even know. AVH 2600 BT. I just like it because it's real easy to program the Bluetooth and everything like that. So if you can see here, let me set this up for you so I can kind of give you an idea what I'm talking about here. So now in order for me to be able to use the factory one, you see how big the radio is. So I try to put the radio in here and you know, look, because the chrome trim right here, this chrome trim comes all the way to this line right here, the outside lip of this line. So I didn't want to cut the chrome trim up because, you know, I like that. You know, this looks pretty good. It gives the dash a nice little look and everything. So I didn't want to have to cut this, you know, cut in there and trying to fit the radio in there and anything. So I knew I was going to have to move the radio up higher so that the width of the radio would fit. So I knew I was going to be up in here somewhere. So when you get to look in here, you know, I started moving. Let me lift the phone up, sorry. I started moving the bezel down, trying to see where exactly it would fit. So I was having to come way up here like this just to be able to fit that radio inside of this bezel. So my original plan was just to go ahead and cut this factory bezel out, mount the radio in there, and then try to fill all of these holes in and still keep my heater knobs down here. But I got to thinking about it, you know, and my neighbor was like, hey, you know, I got this ABS plastic over here. So now we got this here, as you can see. I just set it right there. Hopefully it'll stay. But you can see like that, you know, my radio will fit down in there perfect. So I can put my radio down in there, mount it. I'll cut my hole out and everything, have my hole nice and sanded down and everything so the radio fits in there perfect. And I'll still have to make me some mounts on the back to mount the radio once I get it in the dash. But this is going to make things a lot easier because, you know, now I got my radio in there and I got all of this space here. So what I'm thinking about doing was recutting a hole for the clock. So I was thinking about, because, you know, the radio is only taking up that much space. So I got to looking like, what else could I add in here besides just my heater switches? So I was thinking about putting the clock maybe right there, right in the middle. You know, just trying to take up some of this space in here because I'm still going to put my heater controls down in this area here. So, you know, I just was thinking maybe I'll mount the clock right there. And like I said before, by me moving these heater switches,